At the end of the 80s, Bruce Willis was becoming one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. He didn't start out that way. Here's some things about Bruce Willis in the 80s that you didn't know. Bruce Willis wasn't born in America. He was born in Germany. His father was a U.S. soldier. When he was 2 years old, they moved to New Jersey. In New Jersey, he grew up in a blue-collar neighborhood. His father was a factory worker. His mother worked at a bank. While in school, Bruce had two nicknames, Bruno and Buck Buck. He was popular despite the fact that he had a stuttering problem. He realized when speaking to a large group, he didn't have a stuttering problem any longer. So he figured being on stage and being an actor was a great idea. He started studying in high school. The first time Bruce appeared on screen was in a movie called The First Deadly Sin. Frank Sinatra's the star, and at one point in a diner, Bruce walks by. The first time he's credited for being in anything, he was in a Miami Vice episode as an arms dealer named Tony Amato. He had been recommended for the role by Don Johnson. They had come in contact when Don was in New York and Bruce was tending bar. In 1985, Bruce got his first on-screen lead role. He was in a Twilight Zone episode called Shatterday. In this episode, he calls home from the bar and he is at home answering the phone. And he basically talks to himself for the entire show. It's not the best thing you're ever gonna see, but it's still Bruce Willis, so it's worth watching. Bruce Willis had gone out to Hollywood to audition for Desperately Seeking Susan, that Madonna and Patricia Arquette movie. Well, he didn't get the role. It happens. He stuck around for one more day, though, because there was another role he was also interested in. Some David Addison character on a show called Moonlighting. Over 2,000 actors auditioned to be David Addison on Moonlighting. None of them fit the bill. The directors wanted Bruce Willis for the role. They liked the chemistry that he had with Sybil Shepherd. The execs at ABC didn't think he had any chemistry at all, but Sybil Shepherd said it was absolutely there. For the first 2.5 seasons of Moonlighting, you could see it clearly existed. Then things started to fall apart. Sybil got pregnant, Bruce became a movie star. Because next thing you know, the show ends, Bruce Willis and Sybil Shepherd didn't talk for 30 years, typical of Maddie and David. In 1987, Bruce got involved with a movie called Blind Date. They were trying to get Madonna as the female lead. Well, she wanted Sean Penn in the role. The producers said, "We got Bruce Willis. We don't want Sean Penn." She said, "Well, if you have Bruce Willis, I'm out." So she was out. The role goes to Kim Basinger, and she gets top billing. Bruce ends up as the number 2 on that one. That was the last time for a while Bruce wasn't the number 1 actor. It was also the last time Kim Basinger was. In Blind Date, Bruce's character's name is Walter. It wasn't too difficult for him to answer that because that's his real first name. Walter Bruce Willis. He could have been Walter, Walter Willis, Wild Walter, Double W. It could have worked. In 1988, Bruce starred in a movie called Sunset. He got the top billing on that. James Garner, who played Wyatt Earp, had the second billing on this movie, despite the fact that Garner spent way more time on screen. James Garner is a professional. He did not like Bruce Willis at all. When the movie wrapped, Garner, who's 60, said that the 32-year-old Bruce Willis was immature and he didn't take his job seriously. He never wanted to work with Bruce Willis again. Despite the fact that Blake Edwards was the director on Sunset, it didn't do very well. On Rotten Tomatoes, it's at 21%. And Blake Edwards got the Razzie for Worst Director. Before turning into the mega A-list star, Bruce Willis wanted to see if he could also be a musician. So he released an album through Motown Records called The Return of Bruno. The first release from that was Respect Yourself. He did it with one of the Pointer Sisters. Respect Yourself did well in the US, reaching number 5 in the Hot 100. In the UK, the entire album ended up at number 2. It's a blues rock album. The Return of Bruno also has a version of Under the Boardwalk. If you like blues and rock and the Drifters, it's worth listening to. You knew it was going to be on here. Let's talk about Die Hard. Bruce Willis was not the first person offered this role. When I run down this list of actors, picture each one of them in the air vents, not at the same time individually, with the lighter saying, "Come out to the coast, we'll get together, we'll have a good time." All right, here we go. Mel Gibson, Al Pacino, Burt Reynolds, Richard Dean Anderson, imagine MacGyver as John McClane, Sylvester Stallone, Richard Gere, Clint Eastwood, Harrison Ford, and Paul Newman. None of those guys could have done nearly the job that Bruce Willis did as John McClane. Originally, Willis turned it down too. But on Moonlighting, when Sybil Shepherd got pregnant, they switched the schedule around and he was able to do it. There's one scene in Die Hard when Bruce Willis is under the table shooting the guy above him. That scene cost Bruce Willis 2/3 of the hearing in his left ear. The blanks were too loud and the gun was too close to his head. In 1989, Bruce Willis got involved with a movie called In Country. This was not a typical Bruce Willis action film, it was more of a drama. The movie did not do well at all with audiences. Of course, critics loved it. Isn't that how it always goes? He was praised for downplaying the role and not going over the top, being the typical Bruce Willis wisecracking action star. It led to him getting more drama roles in the future. The last role for Bruce Willis in the 80s was Look Who's Talking. Kirstie Alley and John Travolta? Cool. And Bruce Willis? Sounds great. Bruce Willis is the voice of a baby, and he's never even on the screen? That sounds dumb. I'm not going. That's not true. I absolutely went, and I loved it. The movie at that time, to me, was funny as hell. I'm sure if I watched it again now, I would just not be impressed in the least bit. They originally wanted Robin Williams to do the voice of the baby. Robin Williams wanted to do the voice of the baby. It was a good match. The problem was Robin Williams in 1989 was really expensive. TriStar was not interested in that price tag. Bruce Willis had a better idea. He'll do it for cheap and make his money on the back end. If the movie takes off, Bruce is doing well. If it doesn't, he doesn't make a lot of money. He's okay with that. So he negotiates 8 to 10% on the back end. If the movie makes $30 million, Bruce is going to get paid, $2-3 million. The movie ended up making almost $300 million. Good decision, Bruce. I have lots more videos here on my channel. Click that to subscribe. Then click that and watch the next one. I'll see you soon.